The road he travelled down was different from the one the others had taken into the city. As Lan Sidre watched San Lan's silhouette shrink into the distance, he found himself lost in thought. Sha Xingchen is the bright moon and the cool breeze. Song Zichen is the unyielding snow and thick frost. It's hard to know if the two will ever meet again. As Wangxian walked along the weed-covered road, he happened to spot a particular patch of grass. This is exactly where Sha Xingchen and Ah Cheng rescued Shuoyang years earlier, he thought. You have to tell us what you saw during empathy now, right? Lan Jingyi asked. How could that person be Shuoyang? Why was he pretending to be Sha Xingchen? And was that the ghost general back there? Where did he go? How come he's gone? Is he still in Yi City? Why did he suddenly show up? Wangxian pretended not to hear the second set of questions. Well, it's a very complicated tale, he started. As they walked, he told the story, and when he was finished, he found himself surrounded by a cloud of gloom. No one thought about the ghost general any longer. Lan Jingyi was the first to start crying. How in the world could something like that happen? That Shuoyang is human scum, total filth, Jinling raged. His death was too easy. If my dogs were here, I would have told him to bite Shuoyang to death. A jolt of terror coursed through Wangxian. If Shenze had been there, he probably would have died of fright before it managed to kill Shuoyang. The boy who had praised Ah Cheng's beauty after seeing her through the gap in the door beat his chest and stamped his feet. Oh, Miss Ah Cheng! Miss Ah Cheng! He yelled. Lan Jingyi cried the loudest of anyone, but although he lost his composure and broke etiquette, as Lan Sidre's eyes were also red, no one reminded him not to make a ruckus. Fortunately, Lan Wangji did not silence him. How about we burn some paper money for Sha Xingchen and Miss Ah Cheng? Isn't there a village up ahead? Let's buy a few things and pay our respects to them, Lan Jingyi proposed, tears and mucus flowing freely down his face. Cries of approval sounded one after the other. Yes, yes, yes. By the time they had finished talking, they had already arrived at the village by the crossroads and the stone stele. Impatient to begin, Lan Jingyi and Lan Sidre rushed in and purchased a chaotic assortment of incense, joss sticks, candles, and paper money painted in scarlet and gold. They then walked to the side of the road and started building something resembling a stove out of rock and earth and brick. The crowd of youngsters encircled it, squatting on the ground, and started to burn the paper money, mumbling as they fed the offerings to the flame. Though Wangxian's mood had been somber throughout the whole journey, he had hardly made any witty comments the entire time. When he saw this, he couldn't help but remark to Lan Wangji, "Han Gongjun, look at what they're doing. And right in front of another person's door, too. Shouldn't you stop them?" "You can stop them," Lan Wangji replied with indifference. "All right, I'll help you set them straight." Wangxian went to the youngsters. "Am I seeing things right? Each of you is a disciple from a prominent clan. Haven't your mums, dads, and uncles taught you that the dead can't receive the paper money that you're burning? They're dead. What do they need money for? They won't be able to collect it. Plus, you're burning the money right at someone's door." Lan Jingyi waved his hand dismissively. Move aside, move aside. You're blocking the wind. The fire here will burn out at this rate. Anyway, it's not like you've ever died. How do you know whether the dead can collect money?" Another youth lifted his head, His face was covered in tears and snot. Exactly. How do you know? What if they can? He echoed. How do I know? Wangxian muttered. Of course he knew. In the 10+ years he had been dead, he hadn't received a single note. Lan Jingyi knifed him in the heart again. Even if you've been dead before and didn't get any, it has to be because no one burned any for you. Wangxian searched his soul. How could that be? Was I really such a failure? Not a single person? Is the only reason I didn't receive any money really because no one burned any for me? The more he thought about it, the less plausible it seemed. He turned to Lan Wangji. Guangjun, did you ever burn any paper money for me? At least you must have, right? He whispered. Lan Wangji eyed him, then glanced on and brushed away a bit of ash that had gotten on his sleeve. Silently, he lifted his gaze and surveyed the distant scenery, not a word passing between his lips. Surely not, Wangxian thought, as he stared at Lan Wangji's serene profile. Had there really been no one? At this time, one of the villagers with a crude bow slung over his back walked over. Why do you have to burn that stuff here? He said discontentedly. This is the door to my house. You're bringing me bad luck. See? Now someone's shouting at you, Wangxian said. Having never participated in such activities before, the disciples were unaware that burning paper money in front of someone's door was inauspicious. They apologized repeatedly. This door is the door to your home, sir, Lan Sidre said, wiping his face off hastily. Hey, what are you trying to say, kid? The villager said. My family has lived here for 3 generations. If it isn't my house, is it yours? Hearing his tone, Jingling grew upset and stood up. Watch your mouth. Wangxian pressed his head down. I see, Lan Sidre said. My apologies. I didn't mean anything else by my question earlier. It's only that, the last time we passed by here, we saw another hunter. That was why I asked. But the villager stared blankly. Another hunter? What other hunter? He lifted up 3 fingers. This house has been passed down for 3 generations, each time to a lone heir. There's only me. I don't have any brothers. My dad died a long time ago, and I never married or had a kid. How could there be another hunter? But there really was, Lan Jingyi exclaimed. He also stood up. He was covered up from head to toe, wore a big hat, and was sitting right in your yard, polishing his bow, and looked as though he was about to go hunting. When we got here, we even asked him for directions. He was the one that pointed us to Yi City. The villager spat. Nonsense! You really saw him in my yard? There's no such person in my family. Even the ghosts beat people to death in that god-forsaken place. He gave you directions? More like he was trying to kill you. You must have seen a ghost. He spat a few times in succession to expel the negative energy. Then he shook his head and turned, walking away and leaving only the youngsters, who exchanged glances. Lan Jingyi continued arguing. He was in this yard. I remember it very clearly. Wangxian spoke a few words to Lan Wangji before turning around. Do you understand now? Someone lured you to Yi City. The hunter who gave you directions wasn't a villager at all, but an impostor with malicious intentions. Someone had been trying to lead us there ever since we started running into cat corpses, right? Jinling asked. Was the fake hunter the one who did all of that? More or less, Wangxian replied. Lan Sidre sounded perplexed. Why would he waste so much effort in trying to lure us to Yi City? Right now, we don't know, but you all have to be very careful from now on. If you run into another bizarre situation like this again, don't investigate on your own. Contact your clans first, get help, and do everything in a large group. If Guangjun didn't happen to be in Yi City, you would have struggled to make it out alive. Many of the disciples felt their skin prickle as they contemplated the outcome of falling into the enemy's clutches inside the city. Regardless of whether they would have ended up encircled by a horde of corpses or face to face with the evil spirit incarnate Xue Yang, the situation made them shiver in fear. Lan Wangji and Wangxian led the disciples onward for a while. As darkness approached, they arrived at the city where the boys had left the dog and the donkey. The streets were lit with bright lanterns and filled with noisy crowds. One after another, everyone expressed the same feeling. Now here was a place inhabited by the living. Wangxian extended both his arms toward the donkey and shouted, "Little apple!" The donkey ran at him in a fury, braying loudly. A moment later, Wangxian heard barking. He immediately darted behind Lan Wangji as Shenze, too, bolted toward them. The dog and the donkey faced each other down, each baring their teeth. "Leash them. We should eat," Lan Wangji said. He dragged Wangxian onward with him, as the latter appeared to be stuck to his back. Following the direction of the tea shop worker, Lan Wangji walked toward the second floor. Jinling and the others trailed behind him, but he turned around and glanced over them with an unreadable gaze. Immediately, Lan Sidrui told the others, "Seniors and juniors should dine separately. Let's stay down here." Lan Wangji nodded slightly and continued up the stairs, his expression indifferent. Hesitantly, Jinling stood on the stairs, neither climbing up nor walking down. Wangxian looked back and laughed gleefully. Adults and children should be separated. There are some things you're better off not seeing. Jinling's lip curled. Who wants to see that? Lan Wangji reserved a table for the junior disciples on the first floor and a private room for himself and Wangxian. They took a seat across from one another. "Han Guangjun, listen to me," Wangxian said. "Your clan really shouldn't take on the burden of handling the aftermath of Yi City alone. The city's so big, if it has to be cleared out, it'll be a thorny, intractable problem whose every aspect will require a massive expenditure of resources to deal with. Shuzhong isn't even under the Gusulan clan's jurisdiction. Survey the juniors downstairs and see which clans they're from. Give each of those clans a share of the city. Everyone who should contribute must contribute." "It'll be considered," Lan Wangji replied. "Consider it carefully, all right? Everyone likes to hunt game and fight for glory, but when there are responsibilities to take care of, they start passing the burden around. If your clan foots the bill and indulges the others today, they won't necessarily feel grateful to you or understand your thinking. If it happens too many times, they'll start expecting you to take the initiative whenever any trouble pops up. That's how the world is." After a moment, Wangxian added, "But while we're on this topic, it was also bad luck. Yi City is too remote, and unfortunately, the guard towers haven't been built nearby either. Otherwise Jinling, Sidrui, and the others wouldn't have mistakenly barged in. Ms. Arching and Xiao Xingchen Daozhang's souls wouldn't have had to wait so many years to see the light of day again either." Cultivation clans big and small were scattered about the land like stars in the sky. Many clans resided in bustling, well-traveled cities, or in spiritual places full of verdant mountains and crystalline waters. No clan wanted to be stationed somewhere remote and desolate. And wandering cultivators very seldom roamed to such places either. Thus if evil spirits began to haunt them, the ordinary inhabitants suffered miserably, with no way of calling for help. When the previous chief of the Lanling Jin clan, Jin Guangshan, was alive, Jin Guangyao had raised a possible solution. However, it was very costly, so Jin Guangshan's attitude had been unenthusiastic. Moreover, the Lanling Jin clan wasn't powerful enough at the time. Thus the matter was considered unimportant, and they dealt with the problem by ignoring it. After Jin Guangyao had officially succeeded Jin Guangshan as clan chief and had risen to the position of chief cultivator, he began to gather and deploy personnel and resources from each clan, putting his hand to the task of realizing his earlier plan. Immediately, he was met by a wave of resistance. Many suspected the Lanling Jin clan of using the project as a pretext to stuff their own pockets and seize more power. Jin Guangyao plastered a smile on his face and spent a full 5 years grinding down the opposition. In that time, he made a countless number of alliances and a countless number of enemies. After much coaxing with the carrot, prodding with the stick, and generally deploying every strategy at his disposal, he finally prevailed. Over 1,200 lookout towers went up throughout the land. These lookout towers were distributed across distant, desolate locations, and disciples were chosen from each clan and posted to them. If something strange appeared, they were to act immediately. In the event that they couldn't solve the problem on their own, they were supposed to promptly request help from the other clans or wandering cultivators. In the event that the cultivators who answered the call asked for compensation, the funds that the Lanling Jin clan raised every year were enough to cover it, in spite of the locals' inability to bear the financial burden. All of this occurred after the death of the Yiling patriarch. Wangxian had only gotten the whole story from Lan Wangji after the two had passed a few lookout towers during their journey. He had heard reports that Jinlin Terrace was preparing to build a second round of lookout towers, expanding the number to 3,000 and covering an even greater area. After the existing set of lookout towers had been built, their effectiveness garnered them widespread approval. But nonetheless, the sounds of doubt and ridicule had never abated. When the time came, there was bound to be another grand mess. The food came not long after, as did the alcohol. Wangxian pretended to glance casually over the table. Spicy red peppers covered a near majority of the plates. He took note of the movements of Lan Wangji's chopsticks and discovered that his friend ate mostly from the light, mild dishes and only sampled the scarlet-covered plates infrequently. His expression unchanging as he placed the food into his mouth. Wangxian felt something tug at his heartstrings. "Is something the matter?" Lan Wangji asked, noticing his gaze. Wangxian slowly poured himself a cup of wine. "I want someone to drink with me."